The live's going to start. Hey,
There we go.
excellent. Hi, everybody. I'm Jen Fine. I'm a co-founder and CEO of YouLi, and we are the best platform for organizing group trips. And we are really excited to be powering some incredible travel businesses, both in the group and FIT space. And as we get bigger, obviously, our clients are getting bigger and running into more and more interesting challenges beyond just the things that we can solve on the software side, which is why we've invited Jeff Ment as an expert in the legalities of travel. And we're very privileged to have Jeff with us. He has been on the Tourpreneur podcast as well, so you may have heard him there. And he's going to be speaking with us today about how to legally protect group bookings and just generally thinking about the concept of merchant of record and liability and all sorts of interesting places that you can get yourself into and ways to protect yourself. So welcome, Jeff. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
So hi, everybody. I'm in Connecticut. I started my travel career about 42 years ago, working in my mom's travel agency. I did that for a while. My first job after my mom's agency was working for another travel agency. And then I worked for American Airlines for a short time teaching Sabre, which is their computer system that they used to actually own until they spun it off. Then I carried on to Eastern Airlines, Continental Airlines, and I was a tour guide for a company in New York for a while. Then I went to law school at the University of Miami, and I am the product of a mom travel agent and a dad who's a judge. So I take from both sides, I blend together, and I am a travel lawyer with clients on 7 continents. Well, sometimes they stop in Antarctica, but I have clients with offices on 6 continents. But I just represented a client who actually took Jimmy Buffett's Coral Reefer Band to Antarctica, performed on Antarctica, one of the first concerts ever to be performed on that great piece of real estate.
Wow.
And so I have clients that are small and large. They might be a tour operator that's one person. They might be some of the world's largest tour operators, people who plan trips, travel advisors, people who are doing FIT planning. I think I represent plenty of online platform companies that are doing travel, connecting people to travel people. So I feel pretty confident that I can deliver for you today something worthwhile. So that's the brief bit about me. I look at group bookings from a very interesting perspective. I think of the company doing a group booking as being somewhere in the middle between the customers on one side and the suppliers, the contractors, the actual service providers on the other side. So I think of my job is to protect the girl in the middle. You know, what am I going to do to keep that tour operator, trip planner? Lots of different words mean the same thing. You can be a travel advisor who happens to plan a group trip. That doesn't make you necessarily a tour operator. You can be an influencer partnering with a travel person. That doesn't make the influencer a tour operator either. But it means you're planning travel for people. So if we just boil it down to planning travel for people, that's what I like to think about and who I represent. In some instances, you are this thing called a merchant of record, and in some instances, you're not the merchant of record. And honestly, pre-pandemic, we didn't worry so much about this whole merchant of record phrase, but it became super important in the pandemic when chargebacks started coming at us left and right. And I must have had my hands involved in several thousand chargebacks during the pandemic in arguing about who was or wasn't a merchant of record. So what I want to do today in a very high level, short story really, is tell you about how to protect yourself. And if you're a tour planner, and you're contracting with companies that are going to deliver transportation services, hotel services, restaurant services, step-on tour guiding services, you want to make sure that they're going to be responsible if something goes wrong on their end. You don't want to buy on to more responsibility and liability than you have to. So you need to have good contracts that have, in particular, things like the word indemnification. I know legal talks should be interesting and not too legally boring, but the word indemnification is an important word if you're a tour company or a tour person or a group planner planning something with somebody else, because you want to be indemnified by them if something goes wrong. Indemnification is only as good as the assets or insurance on the other side. So if you get indemnified by a guy who has nothing, indemnity means nothing. So that goes towards like your vendor vetting, your vendor selection. You got to pick people who, when they sign an indemnification provision, it actually might mean something. Indemnification provisions can be drafted from super short to super long. And I caution you that when you're being asked to indemnify somebody else, rather than you asking somebody to indemnify you, you be really careful and read what it is you're signing up for. Because if you bite off more than you can chew and you agree to indemnify more than you should be doing, you're putting yourself at risk, because your insurance policy, if you have a liability, errors and omission, professional liability, they don't pick up just because you promise to indemnify somebody else. So word to the wise, when you are indemnifying someone, be really careful about what you're doing. When you're asking somebody to indemnify you, try to get the broadest. It's like it's two sides of the coin. When you're indemnifying somebody, you want it really broad, narrow. And when someone's indemnifying you, you want it really broad. If you're in a situation where you can get yourself named on the vendor's insurance policy, that's great. If you can become an additional insured, if you can get a certificate of insurance from a motor coach operator in Chile, that's great if you can do it. You might not be able to, but these are things you should at least think to say, hey, can I be an additional insured on your policy? You want to make sure that you have the proper contract in place. Contracts are a lot more than just date, time, and price. That's called a rate sheet in our business. And what we really want is something more deeper than just a rate sheet. We want really a contract that spells out the responsibilities and what you're not responsible for. When you talk about contracting with customers, the people that are traveling, you can have all kinds of terms and conditions that protect you. So the following few slides are really examples of terms and conditions that you should have with your customers. Terms and conditions is like going to the dentist. Once a year, you should do it, even though you don't really feel like doing it. You feel like, I don't really want to go this year, I'll go next year. But you should really just have somebody look at them once in a while to make sure that they're okay. Because even terms and conditions that I did 6 months ago, when I look at them again today, I think of something different that should be there. When you've copied somebody else's terms and conditions, or you've cut and pasted somebody else's terms and conditions, you don't know if they had them, went for a checkup anytime in the past decade. So be careful what you do, but what you want to make sure to include are waivers. If you're a company that's doing business with people in the United States, you can really freely contract whatever you want. That is not the same if you're in the EU and you're subject to the package travel directive. That's a different situation. So anybody that's listening that does business in different places, you can have terms and conditions that are country specific for where your customers are coming from. And that's important. In terms and conditions, you want to be able to have waiver language that limits your liability and saves you from the lawsuit. If you're a tour planner, tour organizer, and you have a supplier, you don't want to be responsible for the supplier's problem. So real life example, this morning I was working on a case where a balloon, one of those sightseeing balloons that takes 16 people up in the air in Africa for a beautiful African sunrise. Well, it was beautiful until this giant downdraft came and the thing had a hard landing. We used the word hard landing. The people who were in it said it was a crash, and it was a giant crash. And they're trying to get their US-based tour operator to be responsible for paying all of their damages, which go on and on and on about the suffering and the pain and suffering. And for the first time ever, a lady who broke her leg is claiming that she developed cancer as a result of having a broken leg, claiming that it's an unusual and rare, but sometimes condition that is caused by a fractured leg. That's crazy talk. That's crazy. My wife's a doctor. She told me that's crazy. So the tour company luckily has a good contract that says we're not responsible for stuff that happens with our suppliers. You know, we've vetted and picked good suppliers. And so for these people who are knocking on our door for money, we're telling them, go see the supplier's insurer in Africa.
Can I just pause you on that one and just kind of call back to Gina's question, which I think is related to this, which is she's asking for exactly this case. What did that tour operator do to be able to say, hey, look, we're not liable for our operator's incident?
Yeah, it was right. It was right in the terms and conditions from day one that, you know, your trip contains components that are operated by third parties who are not in any way owned, managed, or controlled by us, the tour company. And you don't have to go on anything you don't want to go on. So if you don't want to get on the balloon, don't get on the balloon. You're not going to get a refund if you don't get on the balloon. But if you get on the balloon and something happens, you should contact the balloon's insurer. And you know, we were helpful in that we gave them all the information about the balloon's insurance company and the phone number and the email and all that stuff. And we said, hey, we're really sorry this happened to you, but here's a copy of our terms and conditions, which show that we're not responsible. And here's the balloon company's name and information and insurer.
Great. Sean, did you have a follow-up question on that?
Yes. Well, one, Jen, I don't know if you saw, it worked. And then, so Facebook, somebody, or Katie Broadhurst asked, do booking terms and conditions act as a contract? And it kind of sounds like you're saying they do. And now this is a side question that I just thought of. You always see that accept terms and conditions. Like I've read the terms and conditions button. If that button's not there, like how important is that? If the terms and conditions are there, is it just they're there and that's what it is? Or do you have to provide any indication that forces someone to read it or sign it?
Yeah, so this is like the Olympics. There's a gold medal, a silver medal, and a bronze medal. You get the gold medal if you have a real wet signature in blue ink. You get the silver medal if you have a click and agree. And you get the bronze medal if at least you have them posted and it says somewhere, by booking this trip with us, you are agreeing to our terms and conditions, which can be found here, and then you have the link. So if I'm in court representing somebody, sure, I'd love the gold. I'd love to be able to hand the judge the blue ink signature. That doesn't happen anymore. So then our second choice is the click and agree. And that happens about 70% of the time. And then I have people who simply don't have that, or they're too small, or their CRM system doesn't allow for it. But in the best world, I'd like you to have the silver medal. I'd like you to be able to say the person saw him, or at least had to click and agree that they saw him.
And that's something that platforms like YouLi obviously make really easy to do.
And that's why you should use a platform like YouLi, because it makes it easy to do. These are date stamped. We can say when the person looked at something. We can say, here, judge, this is when they opened it. This is when they clicked on it. This is when they signed it. And stuff like that is very powerful evidence. Yes.
And so following on from that, when you talk about like the gold standard is like a signature, a physical signature, with regards to sort of online signatures, is there a difference legally speaking between like a check the box versus I typed my name versus
not anymore.
I looped my hand? Okay.
Not anymore. There used to be, 20 years ago, everybody still wanted signatures. And then that has evolved over time, recognizing that it's just not the way we do business anymore. Business would be stalled under that. So,
and does that vary by jurisdiction? So like certain states that's true and certain countries that's true, or that's just sort of the industry?
There's no state in the US that requires a wet signature in blue ink anymore. It will come down to whether or not the person had reasonable notice and the opportunity to decide if they wanted to book with you before they did. So here's a bad example. You sell your trip to somebody, you take a non-refundable deposit, and then you send them the terms and conditions. Well, that's not great because they couldn't read them first. And now they've made a non-refundable deposit without knowing the terms of the trip. So that's bad. We're not going to win if that's what we've done. But if we've done one of my 3 ideas, we're going to be okay.
Excellent. Well, thank you for going on that tangent. I think now you have a COVID waiver example, which looks very detailed.
We're still doing them. We're still doing them because we're not, we're better. We're really much better, but we're not fixed and out of it and cured. So we're still doing COVID waivers. I have had plenty of cases where people have gone on group trips and come back with COVID, but I have not had any case where the tour company has been sued for that. So I still think it's important to cover them in there. A release of liability is really just that bunch of legal words. TO is tour operator in our example here, but it just really means that you're not going to be responsible if bad stuff happens. Bad stuff happens on trips. That's life. So we'll talk about a couple more examples about that. But this is what you're going to use to get yourself out of the problem when something bad happens to someone. So everybody should have good releases of liability in their terms and conditions. This is kind of a corollary to that. It's assumption of risk. Assumption of risk is almost universally accepted. There are some places where you have to be careful about the language about what you disclose the risks to be. That's why this top paragraph has lots of different things that might happen. But my cautionary advice to you all is tailor it to your trip. Don't put that there, could be a chance of drowning if you're going to a desert. Make them fit your trip, because when a judge is asked, hopefully never, but if a judge is asked to decide if it's enforceable or not, if it's confusing, if it's ambiguous, if it's too long and stupid sounding, you run a risk that it might not be enforced. So just this one includes all sorts of crazy things because we, modify it as we need to, but make this document fit what you're doing. Don't just cut and paste things that look long and legally interesting.
Wow, that's interesting advice, just in terms of that it's actually not better to kind of like cover all the things. It's actually better to be more tailored.
It's better to really fit what you're doing, because judges, as soon as the judge gets an idea that, this isn't great, you're sunk. Like your ship starts to take on water, and then you have to start to explain why you're warning about drownings in the desert. And then you have to explain, well, how's a person really supposed to believe any of this if you're talking about drowning in a desert. It's a kind of a dramatic example, but really you want to be fitting what you're doing into these terms and conditions.
And so a quick one in terms of, you showed us about 3 different kind of blocks of things that we're asking the traveler to kind of look at, like assumption of risk, release of liability, COVID waiver. Would you recommend sort of splitting those up into 3 separate, like agree to this, agree to this, agree to this, or would you put it in one document and have
one
them
document.
check?
Yeah, one document. I mean, I have some clients that want people to initial all these paragraphs. That's too much. That's crazy. I have clients that just put it all in one document, have people read it and agree to it and go off on their way.
But I suppose it's also like recognizing that as humans, I mean, how often do I read the terms and conditions that I agree to? I'm a bit of an adventurous traveler, so I'm like, yeah, I'm gonna, like jump off a bridge, whatever, sign my liability waiver. But, sort of recognizing, especially in the case of like White Island, that the cruise company seems to have not made it overly explicit that there was actually a risk to going to this volcanic island. Now, you would think that just sort of basic common sense would say, I'm going on a volcanic island, there is a risk of a volcanic eruption. But apparently, the people who went on it felt like they were misled.
Yeah, and the moment that happened, and the moment I saw that on CNN, I knew right away that there were going to be people who were going to blame the cruise line for that, or really it's an expedition company that took them over there. It wasn't the cruise line who actually had the shore excursions. But yeah, you need to warn people and you need to protect yourself. And you need to not make you need to be careful in how you promote things. And that's really what these next couple of slides are about. Because as a travel company, when you promote something, you're going to have to eat your words later on, perhaps. And so you want to be careful on social media. This is a story. This is a real story. This is a real guy. Sadly, he died, so he's not alive anymore. He went on vacation in Mexico. We don't know really what happened to him, but he got killed at the hotel, and he came back, and his widow sued the travel agency. This is an active, real case in Texas right now. And they sued the travel agency based on what you're looking at right here. So these are 2 posts, social media posts from the travel agent's social media. And the top part of each one are her own words. And so what you're seeing here on the right-hand side, she is reposting an article from a newspaper called the Cancun Sun. If anybody subscribes to the Cancun Sun, I will buy you a nice dinner in New York City. You will come meet me. Because nobody subscribes to the Cancun Sun, because it's like the National Enquirer, okay? It's junk. So she's reposting the Cancun Sun story about how safe Cancun is, and it's even safer than Paris and Las Vegas. There is not one credible source of statistics that supports that statement. So she's being sued partly because she reposted something. Now, look, it's not the travel agent's fault that the guy died in Mexico. 100%. She's going to win. It's not her fault. But why is there even a case against her? Because of this stuff. Because she posted this, the lawyer found it, and now he's blaming her for not warning about the dangers in Cancun. The post on the left, she's reposting a US Mexican travel warning, which is a legitimate thing. But she's talking about crime in Mexico and how it's the same crime here in the US, but there we call it cartels and here we call it gangs. Like, at some point, guys, you're a travel company and you're selling travel. It is not your job to offer your social thoughts on things like this in social media that a lawyer can later find and blame you for. So that's an example, like, be careful what you do. The takeaways: we want to encourage travel. We want to carefully select suppliers. We don't want to make silly representations about things. We want to have good contracts and terms and conditions. and you should be able to do that. Now, the other way to protect yourself, of course, is to have errors and omission coverage or professional liability coverage. This is a super boring topic, but you all need some kind of coverage because it's going to protect you from most claims that can be made. Things like we talked about earlier about promising to indemnify the whole world won't be something that'll be covered. One of the other things that you should keep in mind is that the important part of an insurance policy is what does it not cover, not what does it cover, what doesn't it cover? Because insurance policies don't cover intentional mistakes, they don't cover dishonest or fraudulent mistakes. And importantly, if you look at letter F, they don't cover disputes about refunds. That was a big eye opener in the pandemic, all these lawsuits about refunds. If you have your errors and omission insurance from one of the two giant insurance companies in the US that sell insurance to travel companies, they both have this exclusion. They don't cover arguments about refunds, and they don't cover arguments about chargebacks. So if you're the merchant of record and you're processing money and there's a dispute later on about the charge itself because somebody doesn't like the trip, or you had to postpone the trip to a new day because of COVID, and you get sued, your E&O policy isn't going to cover that. So you need to be mindful of that. So that in like under a half hour is like years worth of knowledge, all smushed together and delivered in hopefully an interesting format.
That was brilliant. Yeah, I feel like I learn stuff every time I get legal people coming in to speak about it, because obviously it is such a really complex topic. And obviously we strongly encourage everyone who's on the call here to reach out to Jeff or to your legal advisors to get really specific advice, right? Like what he's saying is make sure that your terms and conditions are appropriate for your company. So, definitely that's a takeaway from this. And I just want to take a quick opportunity to kind of show you guys from a technical standpoint what some of this stuff looks like on the YouLi platform, and then we'll jump back into more questions. So feel free to pop those into the chat. So I'm just going to pull up and talk a little bit about the merchant of record concept. So one thing I did just want to touch on is that YouLi is not a merchant of record. So we are a software provider. And so if you run trips on our platform, we never take that money. We're never the ones that show on the Stripe chart that shows up on your customer's credit card statement. So what you see here is on the YouLi platform, when you've connected your Stripe account, that's your Stripe account. So if you can see this in the YouLi platform, that means you are the merchant of record. It means that your company is the one who will get the charge back if something happens and there's a dispute on the financial side of that. So that's if you own the trips. But of course, on the YouLi platform, you can actually be an affiliate or a co-planner. And so if you're on a trip and you don't see the pricing tab, so here, oh, sorry. So here you can see the pricing tab, but if you cannot see that, then that means that you are not the merchant of record because you don't control that. So that's just a technical way of knowing that. Another quick way to know whether or not you're the merchant of record on a trip is this one. So if your logo on the trip page is the one on the left, you're the merchant of record on that trip if you take credit cards, right? So on YouLi, you can choose not to take credit cards. You can use ACH and some other payment methods. But if your logo is there, that means that you're the merchant of record on that. So we also do what we call affiliate partnerships. So this is the same trip, but just sold through an affiliate called We Love Transformational Travel. In this case, the affiliate's the one who's marketing this, and there is an affiliate relationship, and this gets back to contracts as well. So when you're agreeing to have an affiliate like We Love Transformational Travel sell your trips, make sure you have a good contract in place in terms of what that arrangement is, in terms of chargebacks and liability and all those kinds of things. But also just noting that if you are selling through We Love Transformational Travel, they may just sell it under their own brand. And so you can work with them either way, where they're the affiliate and you're co-branded, or it could be they just are sort of the brand that is selling the trip, in which case they are the merchant of record, they take the money and then they pay you out. So there's a lot of different ways in which, you know, money can flow around. And so if you're interested in learning more about that, do feel free to reach out to our team to understand how to set that up in your account, depending on whether or not you want to be the merchant of record or don't, and whether or not you have affiliates or just selling directly. So that was just a quick whirlwind tour of how that looks on the platform itself. Any questions on kind of what I just showed you guys? Perfect. Oh, and I see Eleanor is actually on the call. So she's the one who leads the Run Wild retreats. And actually, she had a really good question, not relating to merchant record, but relating to IP of her itineraries. So if another tour operator blindly copies her itineraries, how can she defend herself?
Okay, super interesting topic. Falls under the umbrella of intellectual property and what you can and can't do about it. You cannot copyright an itinerary, but you can copyright your description. So here's an example. I have a client that had a trip retracing the gold rush. And so day one is in, I don't know, Alaska or Canada, and day two is somewhere else, and you take a train to get from A to B. That's not copyrightable, the actual itinerary. But his story that he wrote as like the description of the trip, that's copyrightable. So you can't get a copyright on just the actual A to B to C is the way we're going on our trip. But if you've taken the time to create a document, like an online description of your trip, that is something that you can get some intellectual property rights over. Send out a cease and desist letter sometimes gets the other offender to just stop, even if you haven't gone through the actual copyright process to get a real copyright. You can say it's copyrighted, and you can write a cease and desist letter. We do that a lot. Something that some of you might want to think about is trademarking. You can trademark things like your name, your tagline, your logo. It can't be super generic, right? It can't just be best travel or Jeff's best travel. That's not going to be something that can be trademarked. But we do a lot of them. We do a lot of trademarking for travel companies, but it has to be done with some forethought about whether or not it's likely to be successful. It's more expensive. It's slow. It takes right now about 9 months to get something from start to finish through the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office. So we do them, but we like to give good advice about whether we think it's going to win or not before we do it.
Yeah, and I suppose it's the enforceability side of it that's always the challenge, right? You can send the cease and desist letter, but will they? And you know, just I suppose a constant challenge for all people who hold IP and have to, you know, and can't just keep it hidden, right? Like you can't hide your itinerary.
Right.
Although we have a client once who had a trip that was like completely surprise trip. It was sort of like a trip to Namibia, and basically you just signed up for 10 days and you didn't know until you arrived what the actual itinerary was. But I feel like most people can't get away with that kind of
Well, it's a good question. I know a lot of you spend a lot of time making your trips special and having those wow moments, and that's what everybody wants to have, the experience. And so you don't really want your competitors to steal that experience from you. But you've got to advertise it to sell it to get people to come on your trip. Right. So it is it is a slippery slope argument, because you want to make the information available, but then everybody sees it, including your competitors.
Yeah.
So write a good story, write a narrative, write an itinerary, use description, throw in interesting information, and then let's give it a shot and try to copyright it to protect you.
Yep. All right, Coco, I think you have a question for Jeff.
Yes, hi everyone. Thank you, Jeff. That was really, really insightful. It was wonderful. Felt like really short and fast. I could have listened for several hours. So I had a venue for over 10 years in Cuba, and one of the things that I ran into a lot, and now I'm running into again, where I'm kind of the middleman between venues and the facilitators, is I had a tight contract, like B2B, between myself and the facilitator. But then the facilitators, several of them didn't have a good contract for their actual students coming on the event. So as a venue, or now that I'm in the middle person, is there a way that I can obligate them to, because
sure.
what ended up happening was during COVID, several of them got sued, right? Like, because we had to postpone and everything, but they got sued. I didn't. And it's still, the feeling bad, the time consumption, everything. And so I just don't know how to.
Yeah, so somebody like you would have a memorandum of understanding with the other business company. And in that, it would say that the other company is required to have certain terms and conditions or certain language that you reserve a right to approval, which should be reasonably given, that you're not doing business with them unless they have that and they get sign off or they deliver it to their customers. Yeah, absolutely. You have power to make that happen.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much.
Are you doing Cuba still?
No, Cuba unfortunately is okay. Currently closed, but yeah.
Well, it's kind of closed, right? I just did terms and conditions this morning for a company who's support the Cuban people and is making trips happen there under the OFAC license exception for support the Cuban people.
Right. Sorry, I meant our venue is closed just because the current the socioeconomic situation right there is really incredibly difficult. It's hard to organize any kind of group event. And so what we're seeing is disappointment over and over. And so the fallback has been really huge. It's just hard to guarantee basic things like bottled water for your guests. And so
Delta's starting to fly there again in the spring. Delta just announced resuming service to Havana. It's exciting.
They are. We'll see if maybe like in the next fall winter season things pick up again.
Okay, well, I hope so.
Thanks.
This is interesting because Cuba has come up recently with a number of our clients, and in terms of marketing that and the embargo that the U.S. has against it. One question I got was, are allowed to market it as going to Cuba? And the advice that someone else had is, well, for the purposes of the transaction that hits the credit card, you want it to say Caribbean vacation, not Cuba, or else the credit card company may actually reject the transaction.
Yeah, so there's some truth to that. But I mean, if you're, not that we wanted to have a webinar on Cuban travel, but if we were having a webinar on Cuban travel, we would say, yeah, I mean, it's a lot better now under Biden, although it's not as good as it was under Obama, but it's like coming back. But support the Cuban people is like a cousin to the people-to-people license that there used to be. And you can sell, I've had 2 clients in the past week for whom I've done terms and conditions for Cuba. So I feel like, that's great. You can't bring cigars back, I think. I had to go back and reread that now. I think as of September 24th of 2020, the language changed about cigars because the client sent me their terms and conditions that said they could bring back 50 cigars. And I thought, like, I don't think so. I confirmed my thought. No cigars you can consume them for your personal use in Cuba, but you can't bring them back here.
Is that where the phrase "no cigar" comes from?
Yeah, no cigars, no rum. That's right, Kelly. Yeah. Hi, Kelly. Yep, you're right.
And I'm looking. Kate is also saying that Square, which is a credit card processor like Stripe, has made her, accept that basically they won't run any trips to Cuba. And so that's, keeping in mind that if you sort of say Caribbean holiday and then it is discovered that it is actually Cuba, you'll be violating the terms of service potentially of your merchant account. So do be careful of that and make sure that and so you may want to not accept credit card
right. Those are ACH
those
trips. Those are ACH transfer kinds of trips.
Yeah, which is perfectly timed because we are now allowing you to do ACH via Stripe on the YouLi platform. So if you don't already have that hooked up, obviously it's just for US companies, but please do get in touch with us if you are looking to connect that. And of course, we always have the bank transfer instructions, so you can give them instructions to do a wire transfer, which is a way that you can have people send you money without having the sort of merchant of record sort of situation, and you don't have the sort of chargeback scenario. Obviously, you still have liability. You know, you're still selling a product. You are still accountable for the thing that you're selling. So all the things that we've been talking about today still apply, regardless of whether it's a credit card transaction or not. But obviously, there's extra layers to the credit card world. The thing we've recently rolled out is buy now, pay later integration. So that's Afterpay and Affirm in the US. And Afterpay, I think, is in about 6 different countries. So we're not 100% across the legalities of all of that. So definitely check out their terms and conditions before turning that on for your account. But yeah, so lots of different ways to get paid. But no matter what, definitely want to be covering your liability. So any other questions that our conversation has brought up, or anything? I know Jeff ran through really quickly, you know, a lot of great content. If there's anything you want us to jump back into and dig in deeper, please let us know. Oh yeah, looking for Jeff's contact info. Do you want to share your screen and put up that last slide just so everyone can grab that?
Yeah, let's do that.
And we'll definitely send that out to you afterwards as well, and we'll send the decks to you so you can make sure to reference that. But remember, don't copy and paste the waiver text. Make sure you
make sure it fits what you do.
That's right. So there you go. Definitely get in touch. As you heard at the beginning, for those of you who missed it, Jeff is a travel business person who became a lawyer. So comes with a lot of credibility in terms of the specifics. I think, Jeff, you mentioned that you are you one of like 20 sort of travel specialty lawyers in the US? Is that right?
Yeah, I think there's only like 12 of us. We get together every March in Florida and tell good stories about travel. But there are very few, which is kind of shocking because it's a very interesting area of law where we do all sorts of things, from employment to litigation to contracts to seller of travel. It's kind of 3 words that you guys are sometimes afraid of talking about, but seller of travel could be its own webinar on Florida, California, Hawaii, and Washington State. But use one of us. I mean, use me if you like me, or use my friends if you like them better. But use somebody that actually knows something about travel. You'll find it to be better advice, cheaper advice, and more timely. I mean, not a lot of lawyers know that Delta is resuming service to Havana, but right. I do.
Or how many cigars you can or cannot bring back from Cuba. Yeah.
So
it looks like we have a question from Kate in the chat.
Yeah, so my question is in the US, do we need to register as a seller of travel in this that require this license, even if we don't operate there, but if we may sell to a client who lives there?
All right, Kate, there's that tricky landmine that we're going to step on a little bit. Seller of travel, 4 states, California, Florida, Washington, and Hawaii. It matters not where you are, and it matters not where you are going. It only matters where the people are coming from. If they're coming from one of those 4 states and you meet the definition of a seller of travel, which is different in each of the 4 states, then you're supposed to register. So the word supposed to is my version of reality, because the law says you should, you have to, and it's required. It's not pragmatic at all for a small company who has a couple of guests from one of those states to register. It is expensive. It is a hassle. It has to be renewed either 1 or 2 years, depending on the state. And some of you do it because you're absolute rule followers, and you're the person who, pushed in the chair when you got up from your desk at school because you follow all the rules. I love you guys. I don't know how you can live with yourself sometimes, but you follow every rule imaginable. And so we do your seller of travel. The other people who want to do them are people who are growing their business to scale and then want to sell it to somebody. And then they're concerned in the acquisition phase of due diligence. Somebody's going to say, do you have all the registrations you need? They won't even know what that means, but they'll ask you that. And then if you're selling to people in those states, you're supposed to have it. You know, I do these every week. We fill them out every week for the 4 states in order of popularity. It's California, Florida, Washington, and Hawaii. And it is worth a phone call with a travel lawyer to talk to us to say whether or not you should or shouldn't do it, or whether you have to do it, because it is a slippery slope. Once they know you're out there, they're going to want you to register every year. If they don't know you're out there, and the only way they know you're out there is if somebody complains that you didn't give them a refund, that's when the jackpot opens up. When somebody says they've been screwed, didn't get a refund, were supposed to get a refund, that's when you get the letter that says, we've just realized you sell travel to Californians and you're not registered. Please cease and desist until you are registered. So Kate, you know, the answer is maybe, but probably not.
So if you have a handful, maybe not now. If you're selling to thousands of travelers a year in California, probably yes.
Thousands, it would be a yes. Dozens, a handful, your cousin, your boyfriend's sister, no.
Yeah. And that's actually similar, I think, in the UK. They have really strict seller laws in terms of like protection,
it is
like in case of refunds, right? So
in the UK, you'll find that the rules are different and that you're more obligated to provide refunds. They have ATOL certificate, they have ABTA rules, and they have the package travel directive that they adopted after Brexit. So great law firm called Travlaw, like TRAVLAW. All they do is travel stuff in the UK. Good friends and colleagues of mine, and that's who you should always direct your UK questions to.
Yeah, great. Thank you for that tip. And does that apply even, again, similar to Kate's question, if an American company is selling to UK travelers, do they need to comply with UK travel law?
Technically, yes. Yeah. Nobody likes that, but yeah, if you're selling to people there, the only way possibly around it, is to have your terms and conditions say that they're governed by US law. And that's what most of my clients do. They'll have at the bottom, you know, a venue selection clause. If you're going to make a claim against us, you have to do it in New York, and your claim will be governed by New York law.
Gina's asking if that applies if a person is coming on a trip from the US, if the company is a New Zealand-based company.
Does it apply if persons are coming from the on a trip from US? Yes.
I think what she means is, oh, go ahead.
Our seller of travel laws are theoretically supposed to apply no matter where the travel company is coming from, if that's your question, Gina. So if you're if you're a company from someplace else and the person's from California, in theory, you're supposed to register to be a seller of travel.
But then that kind of gets back to that original point. You know, if it's a handful, you know, like 1 or 2 Californians a year, probably not.
Yes, I know a good Australian lawyer named Barry. I think it's Barry Thompson. So I can get you Barry's name. I had lunch with him in Sydney one day back in 2019, and he is a great Australian travel lawyer.
Excellent. Yeah, please do send that through, and we'll share that information with everybody. We'll get that contact information. Barry's not gonna know what to hit him.
Yeah, no, Barry is the guy in Australia.
Barry's the guy to know. Let's see. I'm just reading that Kate's saying, yeah, her contracts say that they're governed by the state of Maine US laws. And yeah, and of course, being specific about the state, if you are in the US, is obviously relevant. I think that's true in most countries. Yeah.
Yeah, well, you have to, well, here in the US anyways, you have to pick a state because there really is no common federal law that governs any of this. So unlike different, you know, some countries have like their federal law applies across their territory, whether or not it's provinces or sections or political subdivisions. Here, you need to pick a state for what your choice of law is going to be.
Yeah. And that's all, you know, obviously one of the challenges of working in the United States is just like every state's kind of got its own thing. And as we discovered here, technically you have to comply with the laws in the state where your customers are coming from, not necessarily where you're operating from. And obviously, though, it comes back to contracts again and setting the right expectations, right? Because what we're worried about is that there's going to be a dispute. So what you strive to do is make sure that there isn't a dispute, and then, you know, then things are good for everyone, right?
Right.
I just want to share really quickly. Katie Broadhurst shared a template that she's recommends is a good starting point, but needs lawyer approval for affiliate agreements. So you can pop onto our Facebook group and check that out. And we'll share that link as well. But that's like if you're having someone else resell your trips, and so you're co-branding, you'll definitely want to get a good affiliate agreement in place in terms of, you know, how that gets marketed and what those liabilities are, you know, in terms of all of that.
And that's the same if you're putting something together with what we now call influencers or people who know people. And if you're putting together a trip with somebody who's going to bring the people to your trip, you need an agreement in place between you all.
Yes. So yeah, but I think big takeaway here is, you know, setting the right expectations with your travelers, with your suppliers, with your affiliates and travel agents. Just make it really clear and avoid assumptions. I know we had a client who had their supplier review the content that they showed to their travelers, and it had an inclusion that the operator didn't actually end up including. And so they just ended up having to pay for that directly, even though they had been marketed as if it was included. And so there was just this sort of assumption that the supplier was going to tell, you know, the operator like, oh no, sorry, that inclusion is not included in the price. And that didn't happen. And so then there was a dispute on the ground. So, you know, if you're having your supplier review your inclusions, you know, making it clear, like, if you review these inclusions, that's what you're delivering to me, right? And that, so that there's that expectation, and you don't have that sort of on the ground like, oh wait, I thought you were providing that. Oh no, I thought you were providing that, right? That kind of thing. I don't know if you have more advice on that, Jeff, in terms of.
Yeah, no, I had that happen. I had an argument with a New York City hotel for a UK inbound to US operator over whether or not breakfast was included. And it ended up being a huge problem. It was thousands of people over a long period of time. And then the hotel wanted to start charging people at the front door for breakfast, where we assumed it was included. So yeah, you want to be really specific about your inclusions on supplier agreements.
Yeah, we're having some trouble with that link there, so we'll get that sorted. But yeah, so inclusions, obviously, you know, people get those expectations set. This is one thing I've gotten some feedback from some of our clients that they actually, one of the dangers is putting really pretty photos of like the venues that you're taking people to. If you end up having to change your venue and you've had a photo of one venue in your itinerary, and then you end up taking them to another one that maybe didn't have the beautiful pool that was in that original photo, people will remember that and might call you up on it. So it's just, it's such an interesting challenge in terms of setting expectations.
So the comment I must offer now is be careful what photos you use to make sure you have a right to use them, because we've had plenty of letters that come from people saying you've used my photo without my permission and you owe me $3,000. So be careful that you have rights to the photos, you bought the license, you're getting them off of one of these free picture sites. So yeah, careful about your photo selection.
Really good point. So just so everyone knows, on the YouLi platform, we do not integrate with Google Photos, and there is a reason for that. And that is because it is really easy to fall afoul of copyright issues. And so we make it so you can upload your own photos, which we strongly recommend, or you can pull in from Unsplash, and do have free to use licenses there. So so just keep that in mind. That's why we don't sort of allow you to pull in a photo from anywhere on the internet, because it makes it really easy to make a mistake that can be quite costly. All right. Well, I think we've covered a
Okay.
lot of ground here today. Oh, do we have another question? Oh, no. Yeah, so excellent. I'm seeing all the chatter going on here, which is great, the affiliate setup stuff. So Kate is another partner that we've worked with who kind of helps adventure travel companies get themselves set up in terms of operationally. But yeah, definitely making sure that everything that you get from us or from any of your advisors, do make sure that they get reviewed by a lawyer before sort of solidifying them. So definitely make sure that you don't copy and paste. And also don't take someone else's photos. So I do really respect most of our clients I've seen are very diligent about their intent and making sure that these are photos that they took on their trips. And so just reinforcing that while that does take more time and cost more money, it is the right thing to do. So I applaud you all who have done that. I think Nate's on the call here. He has an incredible collection of photos from Africa that he leverages. So, you know, and this is a good reason to bring an influencer on a trip with you, is to have them, you know, create content for you. Of course, make sure when you contract that influencer that you have the rights to use those photos, that they're not their photos, or if they are theirs, that you have permission to use them. So yeah, all of these fun things. Sorry, just one last question from Kate. If someone emails in advance to say they don't give permission, then that's allowed. And that if they don't like to be in the photos, that they don't participate in all group pics. So we have ones we can utilize for marketing. Okay, so this is the next level, which is if you have people in your photos. Right. So Jeff, do you want to speak to the people in the photo aspect?
So, you know, most of you have in your terms and conditions some sort of photo release and usage of photo or video for social media marketing. People, most people put in there that by signing up and agreeing, you're agreeing to the use of your photo, and if you don't want your photo, you have to advise us in writing. Mm-hmm. That's the most common way to do it.
Yeah. All right. Thank you so much, Jeff. I hope you had a good time sharing your wisdom with us.
Great.
We really appreciate it, and I hope that everyone on this call is preparing for an amazing end of year and holiday season. And I do also appreciate that for some of you, maybe you were interrupting some World Cup time. So thanks for jumping on to this legal webinar at the same time as your favorite team is doing. And yeah, we look forward to sharing all these links and content after the fact. And Jeff, hopefully we'll have you on again next year, and you can tell us what's changed in the world of travel law.
Always something. Keep selling travel, guys. See you later.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.